There's probably not a person on the planet playing golf today that has not had some sort of back discomfort or injury that has sidelined them, kept them from playing, given them a lot of discomfort or pain. And there are different reasons for that. And my guest today elaborates on a fair number of those reasons, and you might be surprised at some of the things that he says. He is a orthopedic spine surgeon by the name of Craig Boatright. And I met Dr. Boatright probably 15 or 16 years ago when he moved to the Lowcountry here in the Hilton Head and Bluffton area. And he is one of the nicest people on the planet and a very, very smart individual. That is clearly evident if you look at his educational background, where he grew up in a very small town in Sylvester, Georgia, was a very, very good athlete and could have played various sports at the collegiate level, but chose to go focus on his academic studies. He went to Emory University, which was a big step going from a small town, where he graduated Magna Cum Laude and received the Rhodes Scholarship. So we talk a lot about the going from small town to a bigger university and then going to Oxford, which is obviously on a world stage, and the difference in culture and the personal growth that he went through during that time, and how he would not trade that for anything in the world. From there, he moved on to Harvard University Medical School, where he at one time was going to be a neurosurgeon, but segued into being a orthopedic and spinal surgeon. Did a residency at the University of Washington in Seattle. Came back to Emory University to do his spine surgeon fellowship, and worked at a number of different hospitals around the country, and is currently at the Spine Institute of the Carolinas here in the Lowcountry, Hilton Head, Bluffton, and Beaufort. Some of the things that might surprise you that Doc Boatright gets into is where most golfers, and he does distinguish the difference between recreational golf and professional golf, because there is quite a bit of difference on the abuse that the body can take and where injuries tend to happen. But when he talks about recreational golfers, you might be surprised that most of the issues are in the upper lumbar area, the L1, 2 areas, as opposed to the lower lumbar, where a lot of people in the general population do have issue. He also describes how a lot of people who come into his clinic, regardless of pain and discomfort that they're experiencing, do not require surgery. And he and those in his practice don't just jump right into surgery just to complete another one and hit the cash register, so to speak. So we get into the various means that he and his team use to get people back to health, back to playing golf and enjoying life. And then also why golf, in particular at a recreational level, is not bad for your back. In fact, for your overall general health and well-being, playing golf, whatever age you start at, as long as you can be one of the best things you can do for your overall health and enjoyment of life and friendships and everything else that you can do. So just a great conversation. He is one of my favorite people on the planet. I love sitting down with him every time that we get together. We seem to get on these long discussions, and I'm sure everybody's going to love listening to him. You're going to fall in love with the guy, as everybody here in the Lowcountry has. And he's just a wonderful person and a joy to listen to. So please give a big Golf 360 welcome to my guest today, orthopedic spinal surgeon, Dr. Craig Boatright. What's up, everybody, and welcome to the Golf 360 podcast. I'm the host, Pete Popovich. So you may be asking yourself, what is Golf 360? And Golf 360 is a show that was designed to introduce you to people associated with the game of golf to help you improve not only at your game, but also your life. Almost all of our guests are from within the industry in some way, shape, or form, but some of the guests we have are from outside the industry, and it mainly revolves around the business world with a few others scattered in here and there. Now, all of the guests that we have a few things in common. One, they all were highly successful and accomplished in their field. Two, each has something to pass along that will help you in your game and your life. And three, they were all more than willing to give back by passing along the things that they use to help them in their career, and even some of the mistakes that they made so that others don't make them in their journey. So I hope you find listening to them as enjoyable as I did interviewing them, and that each and every one of you benefits from the information that they so willingly and graciously pass along. Hey everybody, I want to give a big shout out to a new sponsor of the Golf 360 podcast, and that's Affinity Wealth Management Group. We all work exceptionally hard for our money, and none of us can afford to let that fall into the dark abyss of the big box financial service firms and their jack of all trades and master of none mantra, which basically means you become a number within a cookie cutter model that's also often accompanied by massive fees. Your future deserves more than average returns and little attention. At Affinity Wealth Management, they ensure that your financial goals receive highly individualized, tailored attention from experts, not just advisors, who are in the industry to be great and not average. As a client of Affinity Wealth, you receive a customized solution to your customized life, keeping in mind your family's financial situation, values, and risk tolerance. Call Affinity Wealth today for a no-cost consultation with one of their experts at 724-754-8200. Again, that's 724-754-8200. Or you can also check them out on the web at www.affinitywealthmg.com. That's AFFINITYWEALTHMG.com. This podcast is brought to you in part by Just Thrive Probiotic. You may be surprised to learn that your digestive system is the key to creating and maintaining the quality of your physical, mental, and emotional health, and it's one of the body's most essential systems. That's why the majority of nutritionists today highly recommend probiotics as an indispensable nutritional supplement. As a discriminating consumer, you've probably been searching for a probiotic that is proven, potent, and effective, and you found it. Just Thrive is your best choice for maintaining a healthy lifestyle. Just Thrive Probiotic captures the power of hundreds of thousands of years of nature's design with a specialized bacillus strain formulation that guarantees survivability through the stomach and upper digestive system. Supports optimum gut health, digestive health, immune health, and delivers antioxidants. Great for adults, kids, and the whole family. Use promo code GOLF360 at www.thriveprobiotic.com for 10% off your order. Okay, I'm here with the very, very smart and very likable, everybody's friend, Dr. Craig Boatright. Doc, thanks for coming on the show.
Great to be here.
You know, when we were talking about you coming on, and when I talked to Brandy, your assistant secretary, I don't know her
She's
official
my medical assistant.
Medical assistant. So, and she said, well, what do you want to talk about? And I said, well, Doc and I used to, when we were driving around looking houses, and so we had so many conversations about the back and golf and the body, and Ingrid, your wife, would get sometimes a little irritated with us that she wanted you to look at the house and get my input, and we're sitting there talking about sports. And
we were focused on the important stuff.
Yeah, we're focused on the important stuff. And I got to thinking when I got this going, I said, I need to have Doc Craig on, because all it's going to be is another conversation of us, all the stuff we used to talk about anyway. So it's cool. It's good to catch up. I'm glad you're doing well and enjoying the air. And as we said, now it's hard to believe it's been, 12, 13 years almost that you guys have been in this area.
It's been a long time. It's been a good 12 or 13 years, I'll have to say. So.
And we're very lucky to have you. But I see you in the gym, and you look great. You lost weight. You look lean, mean, in shape. And I had to lose some weight myself, so it's and yours was for a hip, right?
That's right. I mean, people ask me. I see a lot of patients every day, and they come in and they're like, "Wow, you look like a different person." And I guess I do. Sometimes they don't even recognize me, and they'll. I've had several patients over the last couple of years. I'll go in and talk to them and go over things with them, and then walk out, and they come out and they say, "Yeah, I like that guy, but I'm here to see Dr. Boatright." And Brandy's like, "That is Dr. Boatright." So sometimes they don't recognize me to that extent. That's actually true story there. But I had a bad hip, and I was only 50 when my hip started to bother me. And, it started to really affect me. And as I thought, well, what can I do to try to make it to 60 before I get my hip replaced? Because when I was a resident, which was now 25 years ago, the whole goal for joint replacement was to not do joint replacement in somebody until they were 60 or 65 years old. Now that thinking has changed a lot, but being programmed 25 years ago as a resident, I thought, well, I need to make it to 60. So I thought, well, I'll lose some weight, and hopefully that will help me make it to 60. So unfortunately, I did not make it to 60. I had my hip replaced last December. It went extremely well, and I'm super pleased. I'm back to exercising for 2 hours at the time and doing all the things that I enjoy. But I did lose weight 2.5 years ago, and I'm going to try to keep it off.
Well, I remember seeing you in the gym, and I had to look twice. I'm like, Craig, is that you? And so, it is. As we get older, it's you can't do the things you used to, and now you got to do other things that you enjoyed maybe when you were younger, and you missed out on as you're growing your career and all those other things. But was the hip an old injury, or I know you're a really good basketball player when you were younger. Was it from something you did then, or does it just develop and wear out over time?
Well, I grew up in South Georgia, and the tracks at all the high schools were made out of asphalt, and I was a miler and a 2-miler. So in addition, I played basketball during the summer. I would literally play for 8 hours a day. It was all I did, and when I wasn't doing that, I was doing baseball or football or what have you. So I think it was in part the fact that I did a lot of miles on asphalt. Even the formal tracks around the football fields were all asphalt back then, and I think that was hard on me. But my joint surgeon, basically Dr. Johnson, told me that anybody who wears out in their early 50s has what they call hip dysplasia. And, the hip is a ball and socket. So, and the ball is kind of angles in, and then the socket covers more or less of the hip. So if you think about it, a cup over the top of a ball, hip dysplasia means that there's not as much of the ball over the cup, so it's rotated a little bit more inward, and so you don't get as good a coverage, and those tips tend to wear out faster.
It's like a genetic predisposition to have a wearing out of the tissue faster.
It can be genetic, and it can be something when children are born, they do aggressive screening for hip dysplasia. And every pediatric orthopedist spends a lot of their time seeing patients and screening for hip dysplasia. Because if you catch it when they're babies, a lot of times you can do some things and have it develop more appropriately and avoid that. So, but a lot of kids get by, and I think people, according to Dr. Johnson anyway, who need their hip replaced in their early 50s like me, had hip dysplasia.
Now, you have a very dignified resume for your education, if that's a way to say it. Very, probably one of the most respected educations that if anyone looks you up online, they can find, and I'll go over some of it. Being a sports lover,
I think what you're trying to say is I'm one overeducated redneck, right?
Not even overeducated, but I mean, when somebody's looking for a spine surgeon, they pull up your name and they look at your pedigree of where you went to school and where you learned and studied. It's like, yeah, why would I go anywhere else, right? And when you add in your partner, Jeff Rubin, who we met, and it's like, God, between the two, there is no, the decision's made. It's like, I'm going to these guys. But as somebody who played a lot of sports growing up, was there a time that you said, okay, here's what I want to do? Did you know that you want to be a doctor early on, and then you pursued that? Or did you say, yeah, I'm really good at sports, but maybe the next level, or I might not be looking on to pro sports as a goal, so I'm going to segue over into being a doctor? How did that kind of transpire, the thought process for you?
When I was growing up, I started off, I joke, and I have different people the women that I work with, have children in school age, and they'll tell me stories about how their little guy was getting in trouble and at school. And I said, listen, until I was in about the second or third grade, the only scholarship they ever thought I was going to get was to the state penitentiary, because I was all over the place. And but as I got older, I started to sort of focus in a little bit more and made better and better grades. And so by the time I was in high school, I was making good grades. And of course, in Sylvester, Georgia, where I grew up, if you made good grades, everybody just thought you were going to be a doctor. So it was a foregone conclusion that that's what I was going to do. So I kind of thought that's what I was going to do. I liked the idea of it and everything. And so, but I had one small problem, and that was that I fainted at the sight of my own blood. So, and I knew that what I wanted to do was be a surgeon. So I went on through undergrad and made good grades, and then went to medical school. And for the first 2 years of medical school, I gave blood every chance I got. So I have a sweatshirt from almost every institution in Boston that collects blood. You know how they give you a sweatshirt or a baseball or a bag? I've got bags and baseballs from every institution, because I gave blood every 3 months, steady on, until it didn't bother me anymore. So, but as I was growing up, I thought, until I left high school, I thought of myself as an athlete. I never thought of myself as anything other than a basketball player. And it turned out that I was a pretty good basketball player. I was All-State for 2 years in Georgia, my last 2 years, and I was good enough, but I just wasn't quite good enough to play Division I. My feet were just a little bit too slow. Mm-hmm. And so when I started looking at colleges, my dad said, you can go to Georgia, you can go to Georgia Tech, or you can go to anywhere you can get paid for on your own. So, and because I had I was one of three, I was the oldest, and they needed to fund all three of us. So he was willing to pay for me to go to the state schools or anywhere I could get paid for. And I was lucky enough to get an academic scholarship to go to Emory. And I always say that I'm very thankful to Coca-Cola, because the guy who really made Coca-Cola into a billion-dollar industry was Woodruff, Robert Woodruff, and he gave a lot of money to Emory. And in fact, right in 1980, he gave Emory $100 million all at the same time, which in 1980 was a lot of money. And since then, the Woodruffs have given Emory over $1 billion. But that was a big one-time thing. And part of what that money was set up to do was to bring people to Emory that had academic promise and all that type of thing. So I was lucky enough to be a Robert Woodruff Scholar at Emory, which was a really great deal. They would pay for you. They paid all my tuition. They paid for my books. I mean, there was even enough money to pay the fraternity bill sometimes. Mm-hmm. And it was not just that. They would pay for me to do anything I could make out to be cultural in Atlanta. So, the Braves, I got very creative at making the Braves a cultural experience. So I would get my Braves tickets paid for back then. So
that's a pretty good deal.
It was awesome.
Because that was in the Smoltz Glavin, wasn't it? Or was that a little before? No, that was a little before.
Yeah, the Braves were not good. It did not cost very much money to see the Braves. You could get a $3.70.
The Dale Murphy era.
The Dale Murphy era. That's exactly right. You could get a ticket for $3.75 and go, which would get you into the upper part of Fulton County Stadium. That was 3 stadiums ago in Atlanta. Mm-hmm. And you could get into the upper aspect of Fulton County Stadium and walk right down to the picnic seats and watch the game most days, because there weren't very many people there. So, but it was awesome. It was a great way to spend an afternoon in the summer in Georgia. So,
mm-hmm. When you said you had pretty good grades, that's almost an understatement, because you were Magna Cum Laude when you graduated from Emory. Is that right?
Well, that's it. Yes, I mean I had good grades, so
I'd say that's pretty good.
Well, at Emory, the thing is that you had to write a thesis to graduate with honors. So I had to find something, something to write I had to do an undergraduate thesis and all that type of thing. So it was, and really at Emory, I did play basketball at Emory, but but the thing is, that wasn't my focus in any way. So, and I'm glad I didn't play Division I basketball in retrospect, just because I have known some guys who played Division I athletics, and for me, I think it would have cut down on my personal growth during college, just because college was a time when I went from being a guy who grew up in a small town in South Georgia, where the biggest institutions were the Methodist and Baptist Church, and to a guy who was more of a trying to be more of a citizen of of the world. So maybe is the way to put it. And I think there was a lot of growing to be done, having grown up in Sylvester. And so I'm glad I didn't spend all my time with sports in college, but spent my time doing a lot of other things. So, but I still managed to get it paid for, which was the key point for my dad.
Yeah,
so.
And your brother and your siblings, because
That's right.
then that helped them get along. So you go from there, and you got the Rhodes Scholarship. You went to Oxford.
Yes.
Just touch on that a little bit, if you don't mind.
Well, that's just an awesome thing. I mean, Cecil Rhodes, we're in the year 2021, and, we're all about cancel culture, and, if everybody doesn't, even if they were in their time, we basically, people are being judged for things that in their time were not that horrible, but are horrible in our minds today and the way we view things today. And right or wrong, for that, Cecil Rhodes was a bad guy. So there was no way to get around the fact that Cecil Rhodes did some things and had some practices in developing the industries that he was in, which were the mining industry and diamonds and all those type of things in South Africa, that we would not view as good today. And there's just no way around that. And even 25 years ago, when we weren't judging people quite the way we do today, he was a bad guy. But he had a great idea, and his idea was to bring people to Oxford, and because that's where he went, and he was British, and he felt like that was important to bring people from all over the world to Oxford to study there. So he gave a whole lot of money in 1904 and established these scholarships. And the scholarships basically bring people from everywhere England had a colony. And so at the time that I did it, there were 75 Rhodes Scholars a year in the world. And there were 32 from the United States, but there were there were 10 from Canada, and then every other place that Britain had a colony, including Australia and everywhere else, everywhere they'd been part of the Commonwealth. And in fact, there were years where some places in Africa and other places where the Rhodes Scholars came from, they would not even be able to find a Rhodes Scholar because because the place was not set up to have somebody ready to come to Oxford.
The development of that area had not come to a point that would allow it?
Well, it's just more along the lines of, I think that the students and the setup there weren't really set up to field somebody every year. So there would, and plus, of course, this is something that a lot of people don't know, wouldn't know, but there was a time when the Rhodes Scholarship was really much more about athletics, especially with the scholars that came from the United States. And they had a few years where they brought people to Oxford who couldn't really do the work academically. And so that they had reset sometime, I think that was in the late 60s, they kind of reset and made sure that they were bringing in people who could actually do the academic work. And now really the scholarships are much more about academic excellence than they are being an athlete. And in fact, when of the 32 people from the United States that got the scholarship in 1989, when I got mine, you couldn't have mistaken many of them for athletes, but they were all super smart people. I was,
right.
But anyway, it was a great experience, and it was just an awesome thing to go do, and to have somebody else pay the bill for you to travel around Europe because their school at Oxford is not you're out of school as much as you're in school, and of course that scholarship continues to pay you even when you're not in school. So it would provided money that if you were very cheap and thrifty, you could travel around Europe for 8 weeks at the time in between terms. So it was an awesome thing.
So you go from Sylvester, Georgia to Emory, and then Emory to Europe, basically Oxford, UK, and then all around Europe. That had to expound on your development as a person, your growth as a person. I would have to assume, seeing the different cultures.
It did, and it was eye opening for a guy from Georgia. I mean, it was what I hope for my children. Mm-hmm. I think becoming a citizen of the world is important, and I think it's also what makes life worth living. I mean, it's really, those are things where you can enjoy and appreciate many things. I think being able to appreciate all different types of people is really important. And a place, Oxford, is so much more international than even Harvard. It's just much. They're people. The people that are there. They're studying at Oxford, but they're still very much themselves. And so you learn so much more sitting around. And of course, every college, there are 35 colleges that make up Oxford. So Oxford's like a confederacy, really, of colleges, and each college has its own subsidized pub. So where you can get that. And, one of the things that the English do way better than we do is beer. Or they did back then. And we've come a long way, I guess, with the microbreweries and all that kind of thing. But you could get a pint of beer, and it was a real pint, like the big one, and for half price in the pub. And really, I think I learned a lot more sitting around listening to people from other places talk about where they were from and what they thought and how they felt about things, how they felt about the United States and things. I learned more there around the pub than I did even in the classes that I took and from my professors.
That's interesting. Yeah, real-world experience versus book study and theory.
Real pub experience.
Yeah.
It was awesome.
So you go from, and I'm just trying to paint the picture for everybody listening on my abuse of the English language when I tried to give a word to describe your education, more than qualified to be on the show. So Oxford, and then medical school was Harvard?
Yes. So I came back and went to Boston. So Harvard is awesome, but Boston is just incredible. Mm-hmm. What a place to be a student. And again, it was a growing experience. Medical school, I think really once you start medicine, while you expand what you're doing with respect to your science knowledge and also your ability to do a useful profession, you become much more focused. And in a lot of ways, I think that I became a much less interesting person after I started medicine. But during medical school, I was living in Boston, and Boston is such a great place to be a student and to be young and learning that it would. I don't think I started shrinking until I became a resident. So, but then I think that after you get so focused on what you're doing in training, that it can be a narrowing experience. But Boston kept that from being the case for me, and Harvard was great, but Boston was even better. Mm-hmm. So,
yeah, I mean, you've got Harvard, MIT is in Boston, right? Yale is across the river.
Yeah,
I'm not up to speed on my.
Yale's down in New Haven.
Okay,
so
New Haven,
yeah.
That's in Connecticut. What's the one across the river from Harvard?
Well, there are 50. There are a bunch of colleges.
Boston University's there, right?
BU, BC. So Boston College, Boston University. Boston University is right on the river. So the medical school, Harvard Medical School, is not in Cambridge. So Cambridge is on one side of the river, and then MIT is right there, mm-hmm. And MIT is awesome. That's the only place you can go that I have instant respect for you. If you can get out of MIT, you got to be smart. You can be a knucklehead and get out of Harvard, But you can't be a knucklehead and get out of MIT. You have got to be smart. And I knew some really smart guys from MIT. But there's Boston College, which is a little west and in a very nice neighborhood. There's Boston University, which is right in the middle of the city, and then schools like Wellesley are very close there. There's so many students there, and really, Dartmouth's not that far, Amherst is not that far. Those are all schools. And when you start going west in Massachusetts, it's just a great place to go to be a young person becoming educated.
Did you know that you wanted to be a spine back guy when you were at Harvard, or did that come later on?
I did. I knew I really liked the neurologic system. Because neurology it's one of those things where doing the physical exam tells you a lot. There are a lot of things that you can hook right into. So even without all the modern day things that we have, so a lot of the things that we see and that are interesting to us as people, non-medical people, are things that have a neurologic cause and are related to neurology. And I really like that. I like the fact that the exam meant something when you tested reflexes or strength, that could be linked to a direct place in the brain and in the electrical system of the body. But I didn't want to be a neurologist. I wanted to be a surgeon. And so, I gave a lot of blood to be a surgeon. So, as we talked about. So, but I knew I wanted to be a surgeon. So I initially thought I was going to be a neurosurgeon, and I did a lot of neurosurgery, but I finally figured out that I'd go to breakfast in the at whatever 6 o'clock in the morning after you get there and do rounds, and I'd be sitting there with the neurosurgery residents, and they all were sort of sour and looked like somebody peed in their cereal, and the ortho guys were over on the other side laughing it up, having a good time. So finally, I said, well, maybe I'll try the ortho side of this thing to get to spine surgery, because I was pretty sure I wanted to do spine. I thought spine was really neat. There was a lot of great stuff. We made a lot of advances in spine surgery between the time I started medical school in 1991 and the time and today. It's a field that's really made tremendous progress. And so I thought, well, maybe the orthopedic way is the better way to go. Those guys look happy over there. So I did a couple months of orthopedics and switched over. And glad I did, because orthopedics at the time was doing the part of spine surgery that required the more technical stuff, the equipment and the more technical things like hardware and all that type of stuff was really related more to the orthopedic portion of spine surgery than to the neuro portion of spine surgery. And because at the time they were still split. Most spine surgeons didn't do it all. If they were neuro, they did the neuro part, and if they were ortho, they did the ortho part. But since that time, since the mid-'90s, most spine surgeons do the whole thing. So,
and ortho meaning the bone or the structural.
That's right, the bone,
and the neural meaning the spinal cord itself.
Yes, and the nerve part of it. So even though I thought that the nerve part of it was super interesting, the actual surgical part of it and the rebuilding and the reconstruction and all that type of stuff, that was being done by the orthopedic guys. Now, like I say, over the end of between 1990 and 2000, really, everybody kind of melded together and did the whole thing. So now, any spine surgeon who is doing spine surgery does pretty much the whole thing.
Both.
They don't work together anymore. So there are two different ways to get to the same endpoint.
That's interesting you said about the neuro guys, because I had talked to Dr. Patrick Walsh, the world-renowned neurologist, and he started to be a neurologist and neurosurgeon. And he was asked, and he told me this, confirmed it, that the reason he got out was he eventually went into oncology as well, I believe. But he got out because when you got into neural surgery, as far as cancer and things like that, the survival rate was just like in the single digits, I think. And he said he did not want to be telling people 90% of the time that their loved ones weren't had X amount of time or weren't going to make it. And so he transitioned out of that into urology, which, and he became the famous great doctor that he is. But it's interesting how people start in neurology and maybe segue into something, and maybe that's why those other doctors and surgeons were not as ecstatic or jovial. But it's also a very, I can't think of anything maybe more detailed than a neurosurgeon, because it's such a finite, and you're dealing with nerve endings and myelin sheaths and all those different things.
Yeah, so the thing about neurosurgery is that there are really two parts to neurosurgery, and there's brain surgery, which is we refer to as craniotomies, where you actually open the skull and go in and work on the brain, and that's hard to get good results in. You can get good results with them in that field, but a lot of those things are, and especially they were developing some new things, but in the early 90s, it was, a lot of people that was not really successful, or as successful as we would want it to be, where orthopedics at that time, fixing the bones and repairing fractures. I mean, the beautiful thing about bone is it's one of the few tissues in the body that will regenerate itself as good as it ever was. So you regenerate bone. When you fracture a bone, you remake new bone. And
roughly every 6 weeks, is it 6 or 12 weeks, your skeletal structure was regenerated?
Well, it's 7 years.
So, okay, 7 years.
That'd be pretty quick. So
okay.
yeah, yeah.
my timing was a little
That's
off.
right. That'd be more Harry Potter.
But no, well, but it like a fracture will fix itself in 6 to 12 weeks.
That's right.
And then the spinal, or not the spinal, but the skeletal system can regrow.
Right. When you're 3 or 4 weeks old, you repair a fracture almost immediately within 3 or 4 weeks, and as you get older, 2 or 3 years, you repair a fracture in just a few weeks. By the time you're a teenager, it takes about 6 weeks, and then that lasts until you're in your late 20s, and then thereafter, fractures take a little longer to heal. So we heal a little slower, but fractures heal, and they like, just as you said, it's 6 to 8 weeks to heal most fractures, and then you're basically, now I wouldn't say you're always as good as new, because a lot of times the soft tissues are not as good. But in today's world, we've learned to put the bones back together, and many times the bone is as good as it ever was, because it regenerates new bone. So even if you have hardware in your back, stainless steel or titanium rods or screws or plates to hold it in place, once your bone heals, your bone does the work, and the hardware is superfluous at that juncture. But it heals as without a bunch of scar tissue or anything like that. Where most tissues heal, they don't heal with the same tissue, they heal with scar tissue, and that's not elastic and all that, and so you don't get as good a result. But that's the beautiful thing about orthopedics and bones, is that they heal, and they heal as functional with the same tissue that they started it with, which is bone. So it's successful surgery in a lot of cases. And so as an orthopedic surgeon, you're trained to take care of things that are elective a lot of times, in other words, you don't have to have the surgery, but that if you do, that many times we get very good results in taking care of arms and legs and broken bones and things like that, or things that just need to be reconstructed. Where in neurology and neurosurgery, a lot of the things that the neurosurgeons take care of are really hard to get the best results in, and so they hit home runs and grand slams sometimes, because they take things that are hopeless, and they get a great result, but a lot of times they strike out. And for orthopedics, it's a lot more singles and doubles and everything, where you take something that's not that horrible and you fix it back to being great. I mean, that's what sports medicine's all about, right? So,
especially in this area, get people back to, they go from struggling to walk in to in a certain amount of time, when you fix them, they can go back to tennis, or in this case, golf, and enjoying life again.
That's exactly right. I mean, well, the whole point of sports medicine, the hard part of sports medicine is not really necessarily doing the surgeries and everything. It's the fact that people's expectations for sports medicine are to be as good or better than before. So, indeed, we are able to do sports medicine operations that send people back to professional football and professional basketball and Division I level athletics, and that's common. Mm-hmm. And so those are high expectations. Now, when you're talking about spine surgery and these things, the expectations are sometimes not quite that high. But in this particular community, we send people back to golf and tennis and fishing all the time. So, and that's our goal, is to get people back to leading that active, healthy lifestyle that they moved here to lead as they get older.
Yeah, because once you stop moving, you start dying, right?
That's right.
In this area, and you're not a golfer, but you obviously you know golf, and as we already laid the foundation, the medical side and the body and the spine and the spinal cord and everything else exceptionally well. Back injuries are the number one thing that hurt golfers, whether they're a recreation, whether they're a really good amateur, whether they're a pro. Is it that the spine is just not made to move in the way that the golf swing demands? Or is it the lifestyle that we all have now, where we're sitting probably way too much and looking at phones and pads and computers and everything? You've been in this industry for a long time, and you've seen the transition of the modern tech world versus what used to be probably a much more active society. Do you have a theory on why golfers suffer so much from back injury? Because you get a lot of them on your table.
Yeah, I get a lot of golfers because that's who lives here, mm-hmm. and people want to be active, and I think I take care of a lot of golfers here basically because people move here to be active, and then as we age, it doesn't matter whether you're playing golf or kayaking or tennis or softball at Sun City, which is a blood sport, or all these different things. The older we get and the more active we are, the more we're going to have some injuries. Mm-hmm. But the thing is that I don't think that those injuries should keep us from doing those things that we like to do, except on rare occasions. So when I see somebody here who is likely a golfer, because so many people play golf, and they're having a back problem, I tell them, listen, I think we're going to get you back to golf. And I think the rule is to get you back to playing golf, and the exception is for somebody to have this problem and not get back to golf. And I know you've got some personal experience with this,
right?
So, but what I will say is that I don't think golf is any harder on your back than many of the other activities that we do in order to stay active and thereby stay young and healthy, and even into our 70s and even into the 80s. And in fact, my opinion is that golf is really a awesome sport. Because it is of the sports, I think it may be the easiest to remain active until you're in your 80s. Now, part of that has to do with the fact that when you get to the point that you can't walk the course, you can take a cart. And while you don't get as good an exercise, if you're 80 years old and taking a cart and playing 9 or 18 holes of golf, you're doing a whole lot better than the 80-year-old who is not going out and playing golf. So, and I think there are people who play tennis into their 80s, but I think it's a little harder. And there's certainly not. I don't think they're in their 80s. It would be a very rare person who were doing some of the other sports that, even softball and some of the things that happen in these communities here that are set up to keep people active. By the time you're in your 80s, you have to stop. But there are quite a few 80-year-old golfers. And so I think golf is a great sport, specifically because many people can do it as they age. And that brings me to, as a spine surgeon, everybody's like, oh my gosh, spine surgery, if you have spine surgery, there's no way you're ever going to return to golf. But that's just not true. I mean, we send many, many people back to golf. And in fact, most of our people go back to playing golf after they've had their spine surgery. But the good news for people is that most people don't need spine surgery. Even people who come to me after having seen multiple other people, like their primary care doctor, and they've seen other non-operative specialists that take care of the spine in one way or another, another orthopedic surgeon. They've been screened by another orthopedic surgeon or a physical therapist or a primary care doctor, and they come to me being told that, hey, you need surgery on this. Still, most of the people that I see don't need surgery, and we have our whole program set up in such a way that surgery is the absolute last option, that even people who have something that would get better with surgery, we frequently make them better without doing surgery and get them back to golfing or tennis or fishing or softball or whatever they enjoy. Pickleball has become, a real big thing around here. Yeah, and I mean, it must be addictive, because even though I don't play, I can tell you people have to get back to pickleball. We get them back to that without doing a surgery on their back. And then some people, we don't make them good enough, and they have something that's amenable to surgery, and we do the surgery, and then they get back to their pickleball or golf or tennis or whatever it is. So that's really more the rule than the exception.
What is there anything common denominators that you see when someone's been told that they need surgery? Let's say someone's here in your community, it's a golf community, and they've been told to go see you, and they're having trouble, and they're in pain, and they're not able to play as much. Are there any common denominators that you're seeing that people who play golf get into that will cause them pain but not necessarily require surgery, that something alternative might be a better option?
Well, there are a few things that I think you do see more often in golfers. So, and the best example of that is an upper lumbar disc herniation. Mm-hmm. So the way the spine is set up, there's the neck, which we call the cervical spine, and then there's the thoracic spine. And the important thing about the thoracic spine is that you have the rib cage. So really the spine kind of runs down, if you think about it like a barrel. The spine is just one of the staves down the back of the barrel. There's a stave in the front, which is your chest bone or your manubrium in your sternum, and then there's the ribs that connect it together. And so your thoracic spine is very stable, but your lumbar spine sits between your pelvis, which you can think about as a bowl. It's made out of several bones and some really tough ligaments, but it's like a bowl, and above that is the thoracic spine, but in between are these free-floating segments, which we call the lumbar spine. And so they're under a lot more stress. And so weightlifters, young people who are doing things where they're loading their spine and then twisting, or just taking a lot of axial load, which means that, loading from top to bottom, where you push down on the spine, they tend to get disc herniations in the lower lumbar spine at L4-5 or L5-S1. But in the upper lumbar spine, those disc herniations come from twisting movements. So, for instance, swinging a big driver. A driver is an incredible tool. I mean, it's an incredible tool for hitting a golf ball a long way, but it is a huge lever arm. And even the ones that have the lighter heads and everything, the way we've engineered those things now, it makes a really powerful torque when you swing that thing the way we do nowadays. Mm-hmm. And that twists your spine. And so one of the injuries that I think you see more often in golfers than you do in other sports is an upper lumbar disc herniation. Well, the good news about disc herniations in general And so those people might come into clinic and say, hey, doc, I was out, I hit a drive and, my back started to hurt. And, by the next day it was going into my leg. A lot of times an upper lumbar disc herniation, because we're all set up like a map with the nerve system, may make you hurt in the thigh or just in your buttock or thigh and everything. And then we get an MRI, and the MRI indeed shows that you've got a disc herniation L1-2 disc or the L2-3 disc high up and it's pushing on the nerve. So you have this. So when that happens, you have this pressure on the nerve, and they come to see me, and I see this all the time, especially out in the little holes on the side where the nerves come out, these foraminal disc herniations.
Yeah.
I mean, the person comes in and they're like, Doc, I am dying here. I need a back transplant right now.
The foramen is where, just as somebody who's trying to picture this in their brain, it is where the stems come off of the spinal cord.
That's
that
correct.
Take the nerve impulses and messages to whatever part of the body they're.
That's correct. So the spinal cord stops at the bottom of the thoracic spine, and then below that it's just nerve roots. And the nerve roots are the things that come out, two at each level, one on the right and one on the left, through these little holes on the side of the canal called the foramen. So if you look at a model of the spine, you can see the holes on the side, and through each one of those comes out a nerve root, and then those nerve roots coalesce and become the nerves that go down into the leg. So the sciatic nerve is one of those, and everybody knows about sciatica. And sciatica is what people refer to when they've got a disc herniation. It's irritating one of the nerve roots that makes up the sciatic nerve, and they have pain down the back of their leg. But there's also the femoral nerve, and in fact, with these disc herniations that we're talking about, this would be an upper lumbar pattern, which would be more the femoral nerve than it would be the sciatic nerve. But we don't call it. We don't have a name for that like we have sciatica.
And that's when the disc, I'm sorry, the disc slightly moves out, and then it tilts the vertebrae so that the foramen is pinching down on one of the nerve endings.
It can be a pinching thing, but a lot of times it's just that that little hole
becomes smaller.
That little hole is about the diameter of a finger, and probably your ring finger. It's about that big in diameter, and if the disc happens to herniate at that level and go into the hole on the side, the foramen, and fill up that hole, it'll pinch the nerve as it comes through the hole. So it's a little bit like having a pencil going through something the diameter of your finger and then filling that up with disc material. And it just so happens that the maneuvers for golf where you twist can lead to, just because of the way the spine's built, a higher likelihood of getting an upper lumbar radiculopathy from a disc herniation in the hole on the side at L1-2 or L2-3 or possibly L3-4. So, which then gives you the equivalent of sciatica, except it's usually in the front of the leg. So people come in and with this, and they've got a disc herniation. We get an MRI, and we see that the hole on the side on their right leg hurts, and the hole on the right side at L2-3 is full of disc material, and the nerve is going through there too. So it's pushing on the nerve, and like I say, a lot of times they're like, Doc, I gotta have a back transplant right now. This is horrible. I mean, I'm not going to make it here. And most of those people are super surprised when the back surgeon says, listen, the chances of you needing an operation for this are less than 10%. There's a high likelihood that we can make you better without doing a surgery on your back. So we're going to start with some physical therapy and some pain medicine, and if you don't have a contraindication, a non-steroidal anti-inflammatory medication like Motrin, Advil, Aleve, possibly medications like Neurontin, which are neurotransmitters that help. They're kind of like vitamins for nerves. Nerves are willing to put up with more irritation when there's a lot of that around, so sometimes we'll use those medicines. And if that doesn't work, then we'll try some steroid injections, where we basically use an X-ray machine and we put the needle right beside the hole where that nerve's coming out, and we put steroid in there. And the steroid that we use a lot now is Decadron, which is dexamethasone. It's the same steroid they're using for COVID, but we've been using it for this for 50 years. So I mean, our only concern there was that they were going to suck up all the Decadron for COVID, and we weren't going to be able to give it to people for their back. But the thing is that most of those people are super surprised 3 months later when they're like, yeah, doc, it finally went away, and can I go back and swing the golf club? And they get back to golfing, and they never have a surgery. Now, some people, they don't respond to those things like activity modification and physical therapy and chiropractic. We have people try chiropractic a lot of times because we want to exhaust everything before we do surgery. If you don't respond, now in today's world, we do these minimally invasive surgeries, which we call them minimally invasive, you call them less invasive, minimally invasive, but basically where we make small incisions and we're able to go in and take the disc herniation out and do less or minimal damage to the muscle and the soft tissue that we're going through to get there, and then people do well with that too. So those are also very successful operations with 90% plus good results. But I think the surprising part for people is that many people who have these injuries don't need to have an operation, and they're always surprised when they see me and they've been told by the urgent care doctor or the ER doctor or even their primary care physician, hey, I think you're going to need surgery for this, or they're hurting so bad that they can't imagine that they don't need to have surgery for it right now. Mm-hmm. And I say, listen, there's a high likelihood that we're going to get you through this without having to have surgery. So, and we've got a lot of things that we do that we try before surgery. Now, occasionally somebody is just in so much agony that we have to go on with the surgery right away. But that is very rare.
For the golfers, the irritation or the catalyst, because many golfers that whether they play at a high level, and if they play at a high level, then they've played a lot of golf, or if they get to a certain age and they're playing. Since they were young, they played a lot of golf. So if the irritation or catalyst for development of some issues starts in L1, L2, L3, as most golfers get older or they played a long time, it seems that their trouble goes down to L4, 5, and S1. Is that a reaction to the upper lumbar vertebrae being irritated, causing problems, and then it slowly works its way down, or is that the lower lumbar just eventually gets older and starts to wear from use?
Well, and this is not just in golfers, but this is in everybody. And again, I would say that I don't think golfers have that much higher likelihood to develop back problems related to people who aren't golfers.
The general population.
The general population. I think that there may be, in my experience, which is clearly just anecdotal, but I'm not sure that I'm not a specialist at taking care of golfers spines, because I live here where almost all my patients play golf, and they've moved here to play golf. They want to play golf, and I encourage them to continue playing golf throughout their treatment, except during specific times, like when we're doing epidural steroid injections and we really want the back to calm down and let the inflammation go away. Then we might take some time off from golf, or in the post-operative period we might take some time off from golf. Mm-hmm. I mean, we would certainly in the post-operative period if you've had an operation, but most of the time we're all about getting back to golf as soon as we can, because I think you pointed out that if the older we get, and if we don't use it, we lose it, and it happens so much quicker. It was really driven home to me how quickly it occurs. When I had my hip operation and I had my hip replaced, I was 53. I was in very good shape. I continued to exercise right up until the day before I had my hip operation, and I became deconditioned very quickly after my hip operation, and I was very surprised at that. So I think that people we don't want to take people out of their active life unless we really have to. Now, when you have a big disc herniation, you definitely have to come out of your active, you have to take some time off, and those are the things that I'm supposed to tell you, when you come to see me. Hey, we're going to need to take some time off here. Here's our strategy for getting you through this. But getting back to your initial question, the biomechanics of the back are much more poor in the lower lumbar spine than they are in the upper lumbar spine. And that is, it's the L4-5 level, which is not the lowest disc, where the spine hooks into the sacrum, which is the part of the bowl of the pelvis, but it's the disc above that, the L4-5 disc, and that's a little bit because it actually sits up high enough where that lowest vertebrae is really held tightly in the pelvis a lot of times. Mm-hmm. The one above it, the L4-5 disc, that's always the one that causes the most trouble in people. And so even though golfers, I think, probably have a higher than average rate of upper lumbar disc herniations, I think that the lower lumbar spine is still the most common cause of a problem, whether you're a golfer or not. It's just that compared to other people, in my experience, I've seen more upper lumbar disc herniations in golfers than in non-golfers. Again, that's anecdotal. I can't quote a paper that says that. I'm just saying after taking care of golfers here now for the last 12 years, where most of my patients are golfers, that I think I've seen a higher instant of that in the first 10 years when I lived in Asheville, North Carolina, and everybody wasn't a golfer. So, but it's still the lower lumbar spine that's the major offender, and L4-5 being the most offensive and the most likely to cause you problems, and L5-S1 following that, and then L3-4 after that. Those are your lower three segments. So. But even there, still most people do not need spine surgery. So, and
what would be some of the things that someone could do, golfers, we'll use them as an example, to avoid getting into the problem of the rotational, excessive rotational problems in the upper lumbar, and or keeping that lower lumbar area moving? Is it stretching? Is it like a yoga or a good stretch program? Or what do you see that's working the best?
Well, I think that no matter what sporting activity you're involved in, there are things that you need to do so there's some general things that I definitely think are important to do. So the first thing is if I were running the clubhouse, I think that just like the athletes on the side of the football field in the NFL and in at Clemson and University of Georgia, there's a stationary bicycle over there, and they all get on the stationary bicycle especially if they've had something happen, and they'll ride that thing a little bit. It's to stay warm. So I think the first thing is before you go out and swing the driver, you should loosen up. And it's not even, I think when I was growing up as an athlete, we were all about stretching all the time. Mm-hmm. And stretching is still important, but really I think even more than stretching is warming up. You need to go out and before you start swinging the driver, you need to warm up and get started. So a stationary bicycle will help you warm up with respect to your legs, but the old calisthenic things that people did would probably help golfers to get warm, and I'm not talking
fluids and blood pump and things like that.
Just getting your muscles warmed up. So mm-hmm. however you do it, you could do some very light weightlifting. You could, jumping jacks, what have you. I don't expect to see a bunch of people in the clubhouse doing jumping jacks now, but whatever it takes to get your muscles warmed up, you need to get warm, and then stretching is still a very important thing to do before you go out and start swinging the driver. And the reason I say that is because as we age, and golf is a game that's played by people who are aging and hope to play as long as they keep aging, if you know what I mean. Everybody wants to. You hear some of these guys say that the way they want to go is after they've finished their 18 holes and had their best score ever, and then that's
walking
the way
off the 18th.
Walking off the 18th.
Right,
that's right. So that's the way to do it. In other words, everybody wants to be productive and happy and involved and active until they die, mm-hmm. and that's a good goal. I think that's an awesome goal. And so, but as we age, our tissues become less elastic. Okay, that's why skin wrinkles. That is why it's so much easier to tear a ligament or a tendon as we age. That is why it takes a lot longer to get things back in shape. We just don't have any elasticity anymore. So as the elasticity goes away, it's more important to get your muscles kind of stretched out and moving before you start stressing those tendons, joints, and ligaments. And then when you do have a little injury, powering through your injury, so you're on the 12th hole and you swing and you know that you have just pulled something in your shoulder or in your leg or in your back. You don't power through when you're in your 60s. What you do is or 70s, you basically say, you know what, guys, I gotta stop here, because once that tear gets started, that little tear, it might even be a micro tear in whatever you just hurt, your elbow or your shoulder or your back or your leg. If you keep going, you'll just continue to tear it. Where if you stop, and that's when taking some time off and taking a non-steroidal anti-inflammatory medication and everything can let that heal before it becomes a bigger problem. So repetitive injuries are easier to get as we age, and little injuries are more easily made into big injuries as we age. And all of those things are the fact because we don't have as much elasticity going on. So you need to warm up before you start, and warming up's even more important in my mind than stretching. And then once you get warm, then you do some stretching, and then you're ready to go. So just popping out of the car, grabbing your clubs out of the back, popping them on and starting, even when you're late, is not a good idea as you age.
And do you think with golf, because we'll take a recreational golfer, the people who aren't swinging at 120 to 130 miles an hour, let's say they're swinging at 90 with a driver. If they do a micro tear, it might be a little uncomfortable. But as that round progresses, or they progress in their league or whatever they're playing in, then that starts to become where it's more irritating. Then they're taking Advil and they take that, or Motrin or whatever. Then they maybe take something stronger, and because it doesn't go away, they're tearing it, and then they have to come in and see you, and it's like, okay, you're going to have to take X amount of time off. You don't need surgery. I know it hurts like hell, but is it something along those lines that you see quite a bit?
Yeah,
that golfers can alleviate if they were to just have the discipline and make, okay, I might have done something. I'll take the next 10 days off to make sure it doesn't get worse.
Yeah, and I'm not even sure it always takes a full 10 days. I think you hit on something, which is, I think that finishing up, if you feel like you've had an injury, is always a bad idea as we get older. No pain, no gain is not really a good strategy past about 30 for this type of thing. I mean, it's because I feel like what happens is you get a small injury and you get a stress injury or a repetitive injury going. And then, golfer's elbow, tennis elbow, all that kind of stuff, those are things that start off as a stress injury, and then you keep at it, and then you eventually do have to do something more drastic, like take quite a bit of time off to let it calm down. But if you have a strategy when you know that you've made something a little sore, taking an extra day off is a good idea as we get older, or not overdoing it, taking a non-steroidal anti-inflammatory medication and doing some real gentle things that don't make it hurt, but at the same time staying active. So, if you golf and you start to get a sore elbow, and it might be a good idea to take 3 or 4 days or even a week off, but don't just do nothing. Don't go sit on the couch. Go to the gym and, do some things that aren't stressing your elbow at all. So, I wouldn't say go to the gym and lift a bunch of weights with your elbow. That's not a good idea. What you
maybe get on the bike.
Get on the bike and do some things. Keep your body active, because, again, the older we are, the easier it is to lose ground on being in shape. I guess is a good way to put it. I think everybody understands what being in shape is you can be very quick to go backwards on that stuff. So you want to stay active when you've got an injury and you're taking time off, but don't push through an injury. That's a bad idea as we get older. And for me, I do feel like I know how to take care of golfers better than most groups, but not the PGA guys. That's a whole different. That's sports medicine. Okay, that's a whole different set of things, and for those guys, their stresses on their body are different than even a good golfer. A really good golfer is not doing what those guys do, and it's not just because there are some really good golfers. I bet you're one of them who can hit the ball just as far as those guys do, but you're not playing every day.
No, not anymore.
What's so stressful for those guys is that it's every day for them. Even if they take a tournament off, they're still playing all the time. So their demands and the things that they think about and how they handle it, that's best handled by people who handle them all the time. And generally, when one of those guys comes to the point where they need me, that is a major problem. And a lot of those guys, I don't really feel like when did they get back to the same level after they've had spine surgery.
No, not when you're at an elite level.
Not at that level.
And
right.
I used to try to explain it to people when I was playing that if you're, this is the best analogy I can come up with. If you're going through the neighborhood and you're 15, 20 miles an hour in your car and you run over a 1-inch stick that had fallen in the street, maybe you feel it, maybe you don't. But if you're in an Indy car and you're running 200 miles an hour and you hit the same thing, you're dead, right? So at that level, it's that high. And for someone at that level to go through surgery, they're still going to be elite, but they're not going to be, PGA Tour elite maybe. Or if they were in the top 50, they might now fall down to the top 100 after they have to come see someone like you and go through some type of surgery.
That's exactly right. But for even your good golfers at the level, but at the community level, I mean, I guess
which is the most of the golfers on the planet.
Exactly, and those guys, they can get back. We frequently send them back, and they do, and they play better golf. I hear this from time to time, and it's a little, Groucho Marx, I think, was the guy who said, who asked his doctor if he was going to be able to play the violin after the operation. I think that was who said that, and the doctor's like, "Oh yeah," and he's like, "Well, that's great because I couldn't play it before," but. So I'm not suggesting that you're going to be able to play the violin after your spine surgery, but what I am suggesting is that I have had quite a number of guys come back and say, listen, I'm playing the best golf I've ever played because they had a chronic problem and they were hurting every time they played, and then we treated their problem, sometimes surgically, sometimes non-surgically, and they felt better than they've felt in a long time, and they were able to get back out and play even better golf.
And I would have to say that through the team and programs that you guys have in place, that some of the therapists that they might go to after are going to find maybe some other ancillary issues. You get a tightness here, and we can work that out, and that's going to take some strain off your back. And so, yeah, I can definitely see that, especially being one that went through the program when you helped me out quite a bit many years ago.
Yeah. Well, there's no doubt that we have in our community, just like I feel like I take care of a lot of golfers, our physical therapist even more so. And because a lot of times they take care of a lot of people who never even see me. They're being sent there by their primary care provider or by the urgent care or providers. And so there are people who never come to the point where they need to see me because they go see one of our just outstanding physical therapists, and we are really fortunate in this area here around Hilton Head to have some outstanding physical therapists that know how to get golfers going and take care of golfers. So for me, I've learned many of the surgeries that I do for golfers are the same surgeries I do for everybody else. Which we've gotten better and better at getting good results from over the last 25 years because we've tweaked a lot of the things that we do and have made a lot of little adjustments. The basic concepts for what we do are still the same in surgery, but But what I have learned is that after surgery, I've learned how to get people back to golf. I've learned how long it takes before you can start doing the things that are involved with golf. So, if you have a surgery with me, I don't. And I know that there are surgeons who will let people go back within 2 or 3 weeks. I don't do that, because if you've gone the distance and put in the time and effort and the stress and the risk and your all the things that it takes to come to a surgery, I want to give you the best chance of having the best result. And so I've learned that, sometime around the 8th or 9th week, we let you start putting, and then you go to chipping, and then over the next 2 or 3 weeks, and then you start swinging the driver, at 3 months. And then you swing the driver, and you start with 5 balls, and then you go to a quarter bucket over a couple weeks. And, it really takes 18 weeks to get back to really swinging the driver if you go through it in the right way. But I think that that's the way to get people back, and that took a while. I didn't just come knowing that. I had to learn that when I started taking care of a lot of people who golf.
What you had mentioned, but through the 90s and early 2000s, a lot of advancements in the surgical process of orthopedics and neurosurgery, in particular on the back. What were some of those, and how has that changed from, let's say, 2000 till now in that 20-year period, with it seems like we're on accelerated pace in everything that we do nowadays, that it's almost hard to keep up?
Well, for spine surgery, spine surgery is an interesting sort of example of how things progress and how they've progressed in the last 50 or 60 years. So spine surgery really became better and better and better as we were able to do better and better imaging. So as we were able to make better diagnosis, and our diagnosis is all about the imaging. So initially we had x-rays. That was, 70 years ago. And then we started doing myelograms. Well, myelograms were just horrific back then. The stuff that they actually, because a myelogram requires injecting some type of fluid that will absorb x-ray so you can see it when you take an x-ray into the space that surrounds the nerves where the cerebrospinal fluid is. And it's one of those things where that was a horrible procedure, but it gave images. It gave good images of the nerves, and so not great images, but just enough to tell what was going on, so you could see a really big disc herniation. And then there was CT scanning, and then there was CT with myelogram, and then there was MRI, and then MRI has gotten progressively better. So as we've moved forward with our imaging, we've gotten better and better and better. And so one of the things that's allowed us to do is to be more targeted when we intervene. So if I can tell what year somebody had spine surgery, a lot of times based on how big their incision was. I make an incision 2 centimeters in length, less than an inch, quite a bit less than an inch, and 35, 40 years ago, they would make an incision 6 inches long for that same surgery.
Yeah, my mom's got an incision. It's at least 6 inches long, right down the middle of her back.
And you think, young guys are like, oh man, I can't believe they did that, But of course they had to deal with different things. They didn't have good imaging in the operating room. So what they had to do was they had to open it up wide enough that they could count up from the sacrum to find the level they were looking for. These are the things that's a gross example, because now we can we have intraoperative imaging, interoperative CT scans, and infrared guidance, just like with the Wii, the video game. We use infrared guidance now, and we can put something within a millimeter of where we want to put it with just making a little hole in the skin. We don't even have to open it up and look. So that's one major advance. As the imaging has gotten better, it's made us able to do better and better spine surgery. And other areas are things like the biologics, which are things that are grown in the lab but have been part of the pathway in the body, such bone forming pathway in the body. So there's something that we use now called bone morphogenic protein. In the past we've had to tunnel over and take bone off the back of the pelvis, a bone graft and all that type of stuff. Now we use this bone morphogenic protein, which is one of the molecules that signals for bone to form in the bone forming pathway of growing children or fracture repair. And they isolated that, and we use that now. We don't have to take a bone graft anymore for a lot of the procedures that we do. Or we use bone graft substitutes. So all those things have made the generalized procedure of taking pressure off nerves and stabilizing the spine much more efficient now than they ever were in the past.
That's amazing that advancements in technology like that.
Yeah, well, what's great is when you see that people now who, it may have been that 20 years ago when you had a back surgery that your expectation for going back to golfing or playing tennis or kayaking or going on long walks or any of the things that people enjoy here as they age and to stay active was not very good. But now it's much better now. And part of that also is just our learning curve on the fact that we've learned that when we do one of these surgeries on people, even the bigger surgeries, that getting people up and moving faster keeps them from becoming that rapid deconditioning that can occur. And all these little things, everything from just the way we do the rehab and the timing of the rehab and everything, all those things have come together to make us a lot better now at getting good results than we were 20 years ago, and 20 years ago better than 40 years ago, and 40 years ago better than 60 years ago.
Is targeting the imaging and then the specific targeting?
Put us on pause for just a second. I got to see who this is. This is my call.
All right, we're rolling again. So what I was asking was the specific targeting of the imaging that you have now. Does that allow for? Obviously, it allows you guys to be more specific with where you cut, and as you mentioned, the cuts are much smaller. Okay, rolling again. So, as we were discussing, the imaging has allowed you guys, you meaning surgeons, to pinpoint where you're going to do the cutting and go in, and so it's less invasive. So, has that led to the shorter recovery times because you're not cutting and tearing and moving as much around?
Well, I'll tell you, it's led to shorter recovery times, but it's also led to a lot of better non-operative care too, believe it or not. I mean, so not just are we able to do less when we operate and be more focused and directed toward one thing and not have to do a lot of extra things to get to the same point, but we're able to diagnose things and treat things non-operatively with injections and with all other type of interventions, like things like radio frequency ablation and all these things that you might hear, these buzzwords you might hear in the clubhouse. We're able to do all those things without, due to the fact that we're better able to make more accurate diagnoses and get to where we want to be without doing an operation. With respect to operative intervention, though, it has the better the imaging, the more you're able to know exactly what needs to be done, and so you don't you're very targeted. So frequently, I have people ask, say, "Hey, Doc, when you get in there, you just do whatever you need to do to make sure you take care of the whole thing." And I often explain that, hey, our operative plan is basically, sometimes we do have to alter our operative plan a little bit after we get there, but generally we're being very targeted about where we're going and what we're doing, and that's because our imaging is so good now that we can really see what's going on. So we don't have to go in there and check and explore about and see what's going on. We're going right to what we think the problem is, and addressing that, and not doing a lot of other stuff, and that makes for less surgery, more effective surgery, which makes for quicker recovery and less long-term scarring and damage to the tissues around surgery, and people do a lot better that way.
How much does diet play a role in somebody's back issue? You, someone who because of it, you had to have a surgery and you lost a fair amount of weight, and you obviously you work out a lot, but you also don't lose that kind of weight. And you didn't lose 100 pounds, but you lost enough that
60,
right, and people didn't recognize you. I think I lost 30 or 40. and maybe that's the reason my back has been one of the reasons, I'm sure. But what about the diet as far as how much weight somebody's carrying, and almost as important is the inflammation factor from a poor diet, especially as we're talking about the lumbar spine and the digestive tract and the inflammation in that area. Do you see that playing as much of a role, that somebody can curb their diet as part of their avoidance of surgery or not needing it?
Well, I'll start this by saying I have people come to my clinic, and sometimes they come with their spouse, and they say, "Hey, if I just lost some weight, would that take care of my problem?" And you can see, that they're blaming themselves for it, or their spouse is like, "Well, don't you want to talk, Dr. Boatright? Don't you want to talk to my husband or wife here about weight loss? Don't you think that's something?" And the thing is that, well, I definitely think, and I'll work back around to that in just a second, that back problems are exacerbated by poor diet and being overweight. Skinny people get back problems too. Mm-hmm. And so I try to make my patients understand that it's not completely their fault that they're having a bad back problem. And what I mean, and the reason I think that that's an important thing to say is because I don't think that browbeating or threatening people into losing weight and making them feel guilty is a good way to treat back problems. And the reason for that is because a lot of them will lose weight and eat better, and they'll still have a back problem. Mm-hmm. But with that said, and so I think feeling guilty and bad about yourself is not a good idea. Now, with that said, I will say that I see many men, because men carry weight differently than women, and golfers. There are a lot of golfers who we both know who are not in the best of shape. Okay, and for men, many of us carry our weight above the belt and below the boobs. Mm-hmm. Okay, the big pot belly there, and that's just the way men carry weight. I will have patients come in; they'll have a very big belly, and they will have a skinny back. So, in other words, I always say to the other part of my team, Pia Webb, who's the nurse practitioner that's part of my team, and her team, our team, and I say, Pia, I hope this has got a skinny back, because they certainly don't have a skinny tummy, but that, if you think about it, the way the back is built, and of course, again, it helps to be able to picture what the spine looks like here, but they're these very short, powerful muscles in the back. We call them the paraspinal muscles, and they go from those spinous processes, those outriggers that stick straight out the back that you can feel if you're thin. You can feel those bumps in your back.
They look like fingers coming off the vertebrae.
They look like fingers coming off the back, and they go to the fingers off the side of the vertebrae, and a major portion of, quote, core strength is having strong paraspinals. So, and they're balanced. Whatever sticks out in the front has to be balanced by those. So your center of gravity moves progressively forward the bigger your belly is, right? Mm-hmm. And it's like any seesaw. We all understand a seesaw. If you move where the board sits on the middle, or the center of gravity, or the fulcrum, or whatever you want to call it, one way or the other, it's a multiplier. It's not just 1 and 1 equals 2. It's a multiplier. It's 2 times 3 equals 6, not 2 plus 3 equals 5. So, right. So when you multiply it, it puts a lot more stress on those muscles in the back. It puts a lot more strain on your back. It strains everything there. It takes you out of, and that can make your alignment not as good. And then so that wears on the system. It's just like, if you've got something that fits exactly right, well, and you have a lot of motion there, or repetitive motion, or repetitions, that does a lot better than something that doesn't quite fit just right. There's a lot more wear there. So if you take your back out of the just right alignment because you're overweight and you're pulling on it in a little bit different way, the wear and tear on your back is a lot more. So there is no doubt that being thin and being in good shape which means you're going to have a stronger core, not just your paraspinals, but also the abdominal muscles and everything. Because, of course, if your abdominal muscles are strong, which is, when we talk about our strong core, we're talking about those things. What that does is that also pulls your abdomen in a little bit, right? You've got good tone there. It pulls your abdomen in a little bit and decreases that lever arm that's going out front. All those things function to make back pain more likely, I think, and also harder to get over. So if you lose weight, I think it's very helpful. I don't think you can blame yourself, though, for your back problem necessarily just because you're overweight. And so the way that translates to golf is, there are a lot of golfers, who, have a tummy. Mm-hmm. And if they lost the tummy, they would probably it would probably be easier on their back. But can you blame their back problem on being overweight? The answer to that is no, because thin people get back problems too. Back problems are ubiquitous. I tell people all the time they're existential, part of the human condition. And so when people ask me, is my dad and my grandfather and my uncle all have back problems, does that mean I'm going to have a back problem? Well, not necessarily. People have back problems, and there are some things about back problems that are hereditary. Much of back problems are not hereditary. It's just part of being a person.
Mm-hmm. It's life in general.
Yes, and really, I think a lot of questions I think you asked me this question. I think a lot of golfers have this question. Hey, just playing golf put a lot of strain on my back, and is that going to make me have a higher likelihood of having a back problem if I don't have one, or make my back problem worse, or age my back quicker? And the answer to that is no, in my opinion. Now, again, this is not I've studied the literature on this, and there are a lot of papers on golfing and aging of the spine, because they're not. And those just don't exist. So it's not my personal ignorance. I think it's the ignorance that we just haven't generated that data yet and analyzed it. But what I would say about it is I don't think golf ages your spine any faster than anything else. I don't think you can really slowing the aging process of your spine, and this gets back to the weight thing, slowing the aging process of your spine probably would happen if you ate a perfect diet and you were thin and in good shape with a very strong core. But the fact is that everybody's back ages between 18 and 80. And there are people who I see who at 30 have a back that looks 45 or 50, but a lot of times those people's backs look like every other 65-year-old when they're 65. So people's backs age at a different rate. I don't think
it ebbs and flows of maybe what they're doing in their life.
It does, but I'm not really sure that the activity that they do makes that much difference. There are a few activities that if you do it, you are going to age your back a lot quicker. I don't think golf is one of those, okay? But I'll tell you what the things that are, if you're involved in a high trauma sport. So I think that if you're a football player and you play football past high school, you're probably going to age your back a little bit more, because you've rugby, football, wrestling would probably you have to put that on the list. Diving is, hard to know about diving, but diving is, has more trauma to the back. Things like water skiing may do it because it's pretty hard on your back. I don't think golf is on the list though, and there are other things that are one that I'm absolutely sure do it, and the one that I'm thinking about is deadlifting. Being a person who lifts heavy free weight, those people's back, you can line up 100 spines and throw in 10 that are deadlifters, and I can pick them out. They age in a different way, and in a very aggressive way. So lifting heavy free weight is a bad idea. I don't think golfing really ages your back faster. That's my personal opinion. I don't believe it does.
Especially when it comes down to recreational golfers. I want to point that out because, as you mentioned, the professional golfers, those guys are in a different category. They're swinging so fast, so often, and the damage that they're doing is much different than what we're talking. We're focusing primarily on your average everyday American or golfer around the globe. And I would have to say that when you could do anything, and it comes down to choices, right? So if somebody out there reached out and said, hey, we have this paper that we did in Geneva that shows that golfers backs age at this, it's like, okay, but what's the ancillary benefit? You have camaraderie with friends, you're outside in nature, you're not sitting behind a desk all day. It's like, at what point is there a give and take between overall health and just back health, right? You gotta, there has to be some sort of give and take at some point, because it's life, as we said. It's not just all, well, you do this and you'll live longer. Well, not necessarily. You can't siphon yourself off in the top of an ivory tower, expect to live to 100 and not have any problems. Well, what kind of enjoyment do you have? As we go back to you going from Sylvester, Georgia to Oxford, or to Emory and then Oxford, and learning different things and becoming a person of the world.
That's right. Yeah, I think that for the people I take care of here, the people who remain active, I think, do a whole lot better than the people who don't. Even if occasionally some of them are doing things that might be a little harder on their musculoskeletal system, they do better overall by far than those who don't. There's just no doubt about that. And I think golf is, of all the sports, the easiest to continue to do as you age. I mean, even tennis, even though tennis is you can play at different levels, and they set that all up. And I do take care of a lot of tennis players that are in their 70s. But what I would say is that golf is even more set up to allow you to continue to enjoy those benefits that you just went through into your 80s, and occasionally you'll meet somebody who plays golf in their 90s. I mean, I've seen a couple of people like that. Although I'll have to say that 80s, in the mid 80s is where most of, I don't see many people past their mid 80s playing golf. Mm-hmm. But because you can take a cart, and even people who have severe back problems, where they have stenosis. Stenosis means that the canal that carries the nerves has become constricted, and it's pinching the nerves inside the canal. And those people frequently have what we call walking intolerance. So they can't walk for any distance without it starting to hurt in their back. And then the further they go, it'll go down their legs, and then their legs will get numb. And eventually they just have to sit down. They get a lot of relief by sitting. Those people are still able to play golf. They use a cart, and they drive near their ball. They get out, they hit the ball, they get back in, and they go. And they're still able to be active and play golf and enjoy those benefits that you talked about. And there's a fair amount of exercise involved in that, just because you're sitting in between what you do. Well, that's awesome. That is really a great thing. You can't do that in tennis, and you can't do it in many other things that even long walks you can't do that with. So in those ways, golf is special, and it's a very, very good thing for people, I think. And being a golfer is, if you learn to golf when you're young and you don't take it too seriously, because unfortunately I know people like you who were professional level golfers, and basically when they can't be professional level anymore, they just don't want to touch the sticks at all. I mean, I think you know exactly what I'm talking about. So I understand that. I felt that way about basketball. Once my skills were no longer up to par, I didn't want to play basketball anymore. And I don't, and of course I can't play now, because that's one of the things you can't do with a hip, with a hip replacement. But for everybody else, it's an awesome thing, and I don't believe it ages your spine any faster at those levels. As you point out, people who play sports or use their musculoskeletal system in an aggressive fashion, I believe past 18, in other words, college athletes, I think that they have more musculoskeletal problems in their 50s than people who did not play college athletics, because they drive so hard at it. And professional athletes who play between 22 and 32, those people have even more musculoskeletal problems as they age.
I try to. I mean, Dan Hellman, who we talked about, you listen, I think, his podcast. He's a therapist and trainer to a lot of people on the PGA Tour, or maybe not a lot. I don't want to I don't want Dan calling me and saying, "Hey, I know I'm good, but don't put me like I'm working with everybody." I mean, he works with a fair amount, and he said that those players know that the price that they're going to pay for the level that they're going to play at, eventually, that payment is going to come due, and it's in the price of their body. They're not going to have, most likely, not going to have a fun time physically when they're older. For the most part, not at the modern day game where they're swinging. The clubs are getting lighter, they're swinging faster and harder, and they really don't have an off season anymore, right? I mean, look at the wraparound season has started already, where it used to be this time of year golfers were taking it easy, getting ready for holidays, spending time with their kids, and then January it would kick off again in Hawaii. But nowadays, they're all, I mean, they might have a couple weeks off, but as you mentioned, they're playing at home. That's the cost of time to pay the piper at some point.
There's no doubt about it. And, in this area, and mainly because I think they like to play golf, there are a lot of retired NFL athletes here. Mm-hmm. And they didn't pay them $1 billion back then, No. So those guys played football, and they were the same. They're guys that we watched on TV in the 70s and early 80s, and they're retired here now. And those guys struggle. They struggle with their back. I mean, their back is a real problem for them. But they've had their knees replaced now and their hips replaced, and their back gives them a lot of trouble. And it's because that's a rough game to play for 30 years. And most of those guys, or however long they started playing when they were 5, and they played until they were 35. A lot of them, and it was a hard way. It was a hard way to live. So
you had mentioned, like the power lifter type guys, and their back is a damage, and like Ronnie Coleman, right? He was Mr. Olympia 8 times in a row, and his whole spine is fused now.
Yeah,
and, I mean, I think it's probably good, and you alluded to it a little bit, that it's good to do exercises for your back, lifting weights, but to try to put super heavyweight loads on your spinal column at a continual level, time after time, week after week, and year after year, eventually it's going to break. That's not meant to do that.
Well, Ronnie Coleman, he was just like a professional golfer, so he was doing it at a professional level.
Right.
The difference between deadlifting and doing heavy weights and is that even the guys who are doing it at the clearly amateur level, but are faithful at doing it, because the only way you can get any results here is you have to do it all the time, or if you don't, you become deconditioned really quickly, and if you're all pumped up like those guys are, they become deconditioned even quicker. It's a little bit like thermodynamics, the hotter in the cold, the quicker it goes. So in their case, they become deconditioned in a hurry. So they really have to stay after it. But even at the amateur level, it really shows. It doesn't show at the amateur level, I don't think, in golf. I don't think it shows at the amateur level for tennis. I don't think, and I think it actually shows in other ways, positive ways, for those things. When you're in your 60s and you're still active playing golf or tennis or kayaking or doing things that, that don't beat your body up too badly. I don't know about pickleball, because
it's not been around long enough.
I joke with people. The smoking was invented by the cardiac and the vascular surgeons, and pickleball was invented by the orthopedist, because it does generate a fair number of orthopedic injuries. But it's such an awesome sport. People love it. I think it makes them happy. All those things that you were saying that are benefits.
The social aspect, the human element.
It's just awesome for them. But the issue is that is at an amateur level, almost all these sports are okay, and I don't think they age your spine any faster, and I certainly don't feel that way about golf. Once you get past the amateur level, that's a little different, and it's just like throwing athletes. You can pick a throwing athlete's shoulder and elbow out after after so many years. They all have the same degenerative pattern in their shoulder and elbow, and have trouble with that later. So but you gotta do a lot of it for it to show up like that. So
there's only Nolan Ryans are the exception, right? The guy was pitching into almost 50 years old and throwing major heat. And as far as I know, I don't think he ever had surgery. But I mean, how many Nolan Ryans are there in the world?
He probably didn't have surgery, but I bet if we looked at at the X-rays of his shoulder and his elbows, it would look.
Oh,
It would look. It would look rough. I don't know that to be. I certainly don't know that to be true. But I'm just saying. I suspect we could pick Nolan Ryan's elbow out of 100 elbows. So, you know.
Where do you see back care going in the next 5 years? Everything is advancing so fast, and like phones nowadays are almost obsolete within a year or two. Where do you see the technology taking the back care industry? Let's say in the next 5 years.
That's an interesting question, because if you look at, for instance, if you look at a lot of the things that get done in the brain surgery, those things have been taken over, and as well as a lot of the cardiac surgery that was done 30 years ago, those things have been taken over by interventional radiologists, where they basically go through the arteries or the veins to get to these places, and then they do these little things that need doing there. Previously, you had to make a big hole in the skull, or do a craniotomy. That's a big hole in the skull. Or you had to open the chest up to get in there and do whatever needs doing. And now those things are being done through the arteries and the veins. So the interventional radiologists are taking over a lot of those things. We haven't had that same phenomena occur in spine surgery, because really what we do is not very complicated. It breaks down to two things. The first thing is taking the pressure off the nerves, which includes the spinal cord and the nerves, which usually just requires removing bone, ligament, and other soft tissues that have kind of aged and degenerated in such a way that they're pushing on the spine, or there's some deformity or trauma that is going to result in pressing on the nerves, and we just need to go in and remove that. So we haven't really figured out yet how to kind of vaporize that stuff through a little tube in a safe fashion and have it carry it off in some other way. You can do that in the abdomen. And the general surgeons have been doing that for years now, where they go in and take the gallbladder out, or a tumor out of the colon, or the appendix out, because they have a space to work in. So they blow the abdomen up with air, and then they're able to work in there. And orthopedists do it in the shoulder and the knee. They blow those areas up with fluid. They blow the joint up with fluid. They fill it up with fluid, and then they're able to work in that area. But in the spine, because of the way it's built, and because you're dealing with the spinal cord and the nerves,
there's not a lot of room.
There's no room. We've tried. There's a lot of excitement about endoscopic spine surgery, but to date, it's almost the triumph of technology over reason. And we haven't really figured out how to get the job done like that yet. Now, we may be getting there, but there's no potential space to work in. So, and what's more is the stakes are super high. When you're working around the ACL or the PCL in the knee, there is an artery back there that you can get into that's bad news. Mm-hmm. But the thing is that there's so much area there that the stakes are not as high. In the spine, when you're working around the nerve, the nerves and the spinal cord, the stakes are really high. So you can't afford to be in a situation where you're not pretty certain about where you are, what you're doing, and without a potential spacer to work in, that makes things like endoscopic surgery a little bit harder. Now, we've made a lot of progress with what we call minimally invasive surgery, but there's still some areas where minimally invasive surgery is kind of calm, and we've done it for a little while, and then we decided, well, we're going to do something in between. So we kind of backed off, and we're doing something where we make a smaller incision and we disrupt less muscle, but it's not quite as minimally invasive as we thought we were going to, as we tried to do it for a while. And so some of the answer to the question is this: the basics of spine surgery haven't changed in 70 years. Okay, mm-hmm. They come down to two things: taking the pressure off the nerves, which I was kind of talking about there, and stabilizing the spine. Because the spine needs to do two things. It needs to house and deliver the electrical elements of our body that delivers that deliver the commands from the brain to the arms and the legs, and even the abdomen and the organs that live there, to them and tell them what to do. And it also needs to get information back, the sensation and where your arms and legs are in space, and that's too hot, and all these things. That needs to get information back from the body. So that's what the electrical system does. So the spine needs to house that, and it needs to do it in such a way that it protects those things from being injured, and they're fairly fragile. The second thing is, and this is related to the first thing, is it needs to be stable. So it needs to support whatever's above it. The spine needs to support everything above it. So every level in the spine supports everything that's above that and holds it up. So it provides the mechanism for the muscles to shorten and contract, and thereby move the levers that are our arms and our legs, right? So the spine is the base of that. It's like if you had a crane, and everything can work in the crane, but if the spine of the crane, that one piece that goes up, is broken or not stable, well, the crane's useless. Mm-hmm. And it's the same thing with the spine. So it needs to be stable. It has to be stable to support the things that are above it, and it also has to be stable in order to protect the nerves and the spinal cord and that electrical system. So all spine surgery really boils down to is stabilizing the spine, which sometimes, for instance, with things like scoliosis or things where people have a huge deformity, the spine doesn't line up well enough to make the person able to stand up straight or walk straight, and they have to do a lot of extra work just to take a few steps. That's one place. That's correction of deformity. Or of trauma, where you've broken the spine, and so it can no longer support what's above it and protect the nerves, so you have to go in and you have to stabilize it by putting in rods and screws and holding it in place. Or after a lot of the operations that I do, where we basically remove things that are pushing on the nerves and the spinal cord, but in doing so, we place the spine at risk of becoming unstable, and then we have to stabilize it by fusing it together or putting in the rods and the screws. That hasn't changed in 70 years. The two basic tenets of stabilization and housing the electrical system are the same, but we've gotten to the location differently. So we get there through smaller incisions. We get there through. We can get there with being directed by an intraoperative CT scan and infrared guidance, where before we had to actually make a big old incision and look right at it. Mm-hmm. All that's different than it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago, et cetera. Now, in stabilizing the spine, well, we made big advances in stabilizing the spine with that bone morphogenic protein, that growth factor that causes bone to form. That's a huge advance in stabilizing the spine, because you put that in there, and basically within 6 months, it's made new bone and healed those bones together, or fused those bones together. Well, that's what stabilization is. So and we can deliver that through a little teeny hole. We can deliver those things through a little incision, where previously we had to open the spine up and take all that muscle and hold it out of the way and move it out of the way. Now we can deliver that through a much more efficient and small opening, so we do less damage to the soft tissue. So what a lot of people don't realize is the problems that occur in the musculoskeletal system with where you have one problem after another, are usually not the bones. The bones usually heal. There are situations where they don't, but the bones will heal. And as we talked about earlier, the bones heal into the same stuff that they were before. They're one of the few tissues in the body that can do that, where it's the same stuff. It's the soft tissue envelope. It's the muscles that develop scarring, and it's the tendons and ligaments that have to be tied back on and then scarred into place.
Fascia.
All that stuff. All scars together. So it's the soft tissues surrounding the joint, the hip, the knee, with multiple revisions, the spine, where we go in and if we do have to do a really invasive surgery where we really have to take everything apart, or you've had a big trauma where everything's kind of blown apart, when those soft tissues reheal, that is many times becomes the limiting factor when you're talking about healing your musculoskeletal system from that. So, and then the nervous system doesn't heal. So if you injure the nervous system, if you cut if you cut a peripheral nerve, they will heal, but they don't. They're so dysfunctional that sometimes we wonder if it's even worth it, repairing a peripheral nerve. But we do it, and they do get some function back. There's a debate about how much function you get back and where you draw the line of you're better off without it than having something that's super dysfunctional. But the spinal cord and the central nervous system, it doesn't heal at all. And now we are desperately trying to find a way to heal the spinal cord and to heal the brain after a stroke or the spinal cord after an injury, but we've yet to do that. And that tissue doesn't heal even a little bit.
Anything with stem cells or peptides or anything like that?
We're working in that direction. So stem cells are interesting.
They usually take them out of the iliac, don't they?
You can take them from multiple places. You can take them from spun down fat. And you can take the fat out, you suction out some fat, and then you basically do procedures where you centrifuge it and all that, and separate the cells from the from the other things that are in fat, including the oil and all that. Or you can take them from the bone marrow. It turns out that the fats actually seems like it has a higher number of cells sometimes than even the bone marrow, which you wouldn't think that if you know medicine, you wouldn't think that would be the case, but it turns out to be the case as far as just stem cells go. But we're a long way on the stem cell thing right now. In 15 years, we might be putting stem cells all over the body and having them work. But right now, I tell people that right now putting stem cells in most places is a little bit like if you're sitting on the side of the road and you've got a dime-sized hole in your right front tire and you don't have a spare. And you're sitting there wondering what you're going to do, and you're pretty distressed about it, and just like you would be when your knee doesn't work and you want to go play golf, or your hip doesn't work and you want to go play golf. And some guy pulls up behind you and says, "Hey, I've got the answer here. Okay, I know what to do." And he says, "For just a whole lot of money, I'll be more than happy to fix that front tire for you." So you're like, "Okay, man, I gotta get where I'm going. I've got the money. I'm ready to go." So he goes to the back of his car and he pulls out this big vat of rubber, and it's being heated. And he comes up. He says, "Pop your trunk." You pop your trunk open. He starts squirting the rubber into your trunk. Okay, so it's almost certain it's not going to get to your right front tire. It might not be the right kind of rubber when it gets there. Even if it is the right kind of rubber, even if it can get to your right front tire, it may not be able to get into the spot it needs to be in, that hole. And even if it could get into that hole, it may not be able to stick in that hole because whatever else needed to be there to hold it in the hole is no longer there. So you don't have that mesh of steel, that steel mesh that comes in your radial tire and holds the rubber in place. There you are. But that's what stem cells are like right now. We're squirting some rubber into the trunk and hoping it gets to the right front tire. In 15 years, we may know exactly what type of rubber. We may know exactly what the rubber needs to be delivered with, how to get it there, how to keep it there, and how to have it even be better than it was before. It may be the best part of the tire in 15 years. It may be stronger than the rest of the tire. But right now, we're not there yet. And so, unfortunately, the stem cells we're just getting started. And when you talk about stem cells and regeneration in the spine, in the spinal cord, they're studying that hard. And there've been some suggestions that we're heading in the right direction, and we just keep praying that those suggestions come true.
Yeah, that'd be big.
Yep, that would be awesome. But it'd be awesome for the knee and the hip and
everywhere. Right?
Everywhere, it'd be awesome. And I think one day we're gonna be there, but I just don't think we're there. We're not even. We're starting to get into the right ball field. We're in AAA now. We might, but we're not in the majors yet on that. We're not even sitting on the end of the bench yet. So, but we're definitely at AAA. We've gone past single A and double A. We've gotten out of high school and college. We're past single A and double A, but we're just at the AAA level.
I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you your thoughts on Tiger. With the injuries he had, he obviously made the comeback, and then he had the accident. Do you see him coming back again? I say, I get that asked a lot. That's why I'm asking you.
Yeah.
You know more about the body and the breaks and stuff he's gone through.
Well, I generally know what Tiger had done to his back before he had this accident. Okay, and I do not know specifically what injuries Tiger had when he had the accident. So
his legs, he broke his tibia, and I think they had to cut the fascia because I think the pressure had gotten so big.
Right, that's called a fasciotomy, and that's a big deal. But I will, and so just talking about the back surgery that he had. So when Peyton Manning was playing in Denver, and he had basically 2 sputtering seasons where he just struggled after he had the first couple neck surgeries. He finally got a bigger neck surgery. He finally got the neck surgery that probably he should have had right out of the gate. And he came back and won a Super Bowl. But the fact is that Peyton won that Super Bowl with his brain. He did not win that Super Bowl with his arm. When you talk to people about it, they all say, he had numbness in his, and I don't know this to be true, but this is the hearsay, even among the medical people, is that his hand didn't work right. He had numbness in his fingers. He couldn't really grip the ball as well as he could before, and that his arm was, you could watch him play. It was clear that he wasn't the same athlete as he had been before he had the neck surgeries. But he was so dang smart. He was thinking so many plays ahead of even the next smartest guy on the field that he still was able to win a Super Bowl. And for Tiger, he did make a comeback after he had that back surgery. And I think the last back surgery that he had, it was a little bit bigger back surgery than the other back surgery that he had. And so sometimes for these really competitive guys who are doing things that the rest of us just dream about doing, they need to have the full meal deal right out of the gate. He finally got the full meal deal, and he came back and became a great golfer, again. Right. And I think it's going to be hard to ever say he's not a great golfer. I'm sure when he's 80, he'll still be a great golfer. But the thing is, making a comeback after leg surgery and after the fasciotomy, plenty of people come back to professional level athletics after having their tibia nailed, which is basically where they break their leg. I'm trying to remember what the name. Earl Thomas, who was a safety for the Seattle Seahawks and was part of the Legion of Doom and everything when they won. I'm a Seahawks fan, so back when they won the Super Bowl, and I think he's playing in Texas now, but he was an awesome safety, and he broke his leg, had a tibial nail, which basically is where you basically just put a long rod made out of titanium, usually nowadays. It used to be made most out of stainless steel, right down the center of the bone, because bones are really hollow. And so you line the bone back up with using imaging, and you put that rod down, and you put a screw across the ankle, and you put not in the joint, but above the ankle joint, and a screw just below the knee joint, and it holds it still, and you remake the bone, and you can get back to being a NFL safety.
It's like putting a dowel through the bone, and then the bone comes back, yes, both pieces up over top.
Yep. You line up the hollow tube, and you use an X-ray, and then you basically put a rod down the tube, a little teeny rod, almost like a coat hanger, a little bigger than a coat hanger, that's straight, that's made for that, and then you take this thing and we call it a reamer, and this is kind of gross, but you take a reamer, which is basically a big drill, but it's a flexible drill, and you run it down over that rod, and basically carve out a real tube right down the middle of that thing, the size of the nail we call it a nail, but it's basically a long rod, and then you slide that rod down over the tube, over that thing, right down the middle of the bone to just above the ankle, so the tip of the rod is just at the knee, and then goes all the way down, and that holds the bone in line as it heals. The bone heals up, and it's almost as good as new in many people. But when you have to have a fasciotomy, that happens because the because the muscle has been damaged enough from the fracture that, and sometimes even from the trauma of having the surgery afterwards, it's been damaged enough that it starts to swell, and it continues to swell until and of course, all muscles held in by a membrane. It's like a sausage almost. I mean, you can think about it like that. And so, but it swells up so much that the pressure in the muscle is higher than the pressure from the artery. So, how you get a blood pressure, you say, my blood pressure is 120 over 80, 120 milligrams of mercury over 80 milligrams of mercury. These are just always to measure pressure, right? So it becomes higher than the pressure of the artery. So it no longer gets blood. Well, what happens when your heart doesn't get blood? What do we call that? A heart attack. A myocardial infarction, because the muscle dies. Well, it can happen in your leg too. We call it, that's called a compartment syndrome. So the pressure in the muscle is high enough from all the swelling that's going on that the artery can't pump blood in there, and then the muscle dies. Well, and you get your foot claws up, and then really you're done. Then that's a very bad thing. So what we learned, decades ago, is that you come in and you basically cut the membrane of the sausage, and it allows the muscle to no longer be under pressure, and that takes care of the problem. Well, and I'm not sure, because I didn't know the particulars of Tiger's problem, but if he had a fasciotomy, which is what you're telling me he had, it's that makes it difficult. Although I have seen people come back and become professional level cyclists after having fasciotomies. So referencing one of my own patients that I took care of in Asheville, where I had to do a fasciotomy on him. He had a broken tibia, and I had to do a fasciotomy, and he went back to the professional biking circuit.
If his leg injury was his only one, then I'd say Tiger's going to do Tiger things. He's going to come back. Yeah. But when you got a leg issue with a back issue, and I know that fusion is as solid as can be, but now he's got two destabilized things. Well, actually, I think he broke both legs. And the ankle was pretty bad. Now you've destabilized a bunch of joints, and you're going to try to swing a golf club.
Well, the biggest problem is interarticular. So when you have a problem where the fracture goes into the joint, so it doesn't matter which joint you're talking about. You can be talking about really some joints are worse than others. The weight bearing joints are worse than others, but the ankle in particular, if the ankle joint doesn't line up like it's supposed to, that's a very bad problem. And you end up getting early arthritis and all.
He's going to be crooked all the way up the load-bearing joints from that point, isn't he?
Well,
it runs a higher risk.
And once you get arthritis, everybody. We all know that athletics at a high level, the more arthritis you have, the more you have to. You're not quite able to do what you did before. Mm-hmm. And so when you have a trauma to your ankle and then you get arthritis in your ankle, well, that makes it hard. And of course, somebody like Tiger, he's not doing normal mortal things, he's doing Herculean stuff. So in his way, so it's much harder after that. When you just break the bone in the middle and you put that rod in there, you can heal up and go back to being a professional football safety like Earl Thomas. Mm-hmm. When you break the bone and it goes into the joint, it becomes a lot dicier and harder to get over.
I hope. Yeah, everyone hopes he comes back, and fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Let's do. I've taken up enough of your time. I always do a rapid fire, like emergency 9 holes. If you got a little more time, we'll blow through that, and then we'll
fire away.
So the Ryder Cup was on a few weeks ago, and they started a walk-up song for the players, right? Their favorite song. So if you were a golfer and you made the Ryder Cup, what would your walk-up song be? Or better yet, if you're going to walk in the operating room, they're going to play a song like you're walking into a stadium. What would your walk-in song be?
That's a hard one. As I've aged, it's changed. So the truth is that in the operating room now, I like jazz. So it would be some sort of free-form jazz that's not loud, but that is smooth.
Coltrane or Parker?
Coltrane.
There we go. Okay.
Yep.
If you weren't a doctor, you would have been a what?
Fighter pilot.
Oh, interesting.
I can't see though, so I would have been a fighter pilot in my dreams. So because I I just, as long as I wear my contacts, I'm fine. But, I don't think they would take me. But surgeons and fighter pilots are very similar beasts. And I know that because I take care of a lot of the guys over from the air base here. Yeah.
Let's see. The most used app on your phone?
Lose It, which is Lose It is a calorie counting app. So that is how I try to make sure that I don't regain that 60 pounds back.
Everybody, probably most people listening should probably check that one out.
Drives my wife nuts. Okay, she's like, "Oh my gosh, you're putting calories in your phone again." It just drives her nuts. But I'm just going to have to keep doing it. That's the most used app on my phone.
Cool. Your favorite sports movie as a former athlete?
There was a sports movie which is from, and I think it was probably the late 70s or early 80s, called 1-on-1 with Robbie Benson. I think it was 1-on-1.
He's a basketball player in the college.
Yes.
And they benched him.
Yes.
And then he comes in and wins the game.
That's the one.
I remember that.
That's my favorite sports movie. But I love sports movies. So, there's some awesome sports movies, and my son really loves sports movies. So he gets me into things like the Titans. And
I would have guessed Hoosiers for you.
Well, I thought about Hoosiers. That came right past my brain.
Small town basketball.
But when I really thought about it, I thought, what's the one that really sticks out when I'm thinking about it? And that one stuck out.
All right.
So,
would you rather live 100 years in the past or the future?
The past. But I'll tell you, that's a new opinion because I'm scared of the future. Mm-hmm. I'm scared of the future because I don't really like looking into a little screen. I love my big TVs, but I don't want to look into a screen smaller than, say, really smaller than 32 by 40, So, and I'm not sure that life's not heading into those little screens.
Yeah, it's scary. Would you rather speak all languages or to all animals?
All languages.
A couple more. You pull into McDonald's, what's the first thing that you order?
A Big Mac. Hey, listen, there are only a few things that I miss at 60 pounds down. I miss Big Macs, and surprisingly enough, I miss pizza. And I wasn't a big pizza eater, but I miss pizza. So, but a Big Mac.
Have you tried cauliflower pizza?
I have, and I love it, and I have it. But it's not quite the same. Yeah, I like mellow mushroom and local pie. So,
a couple more, just two more. Weather worse in Oxford or in Boston?
Oxford. So, but I'll tell you, I spent a lot of time in Seattle because I did my residency in Seattle, and Seattle's even worse. So I actually like the snow. And all three of those places get a similar amount of rain because they're all pretty close to the same. They're all pretty close to the same latitude. And but Seattle, it's just misty and gray for 9 months. And I tell people there's no place like Seattle. Seattle's the most beautiful city in the country, and there's not even a close second when the sun's out. But it's a little bit like being married to a beautiful woman that's sick all the time. The sun's out so rarely in Seattle, and it's that still gray. Now, the truth is, I was training there, so I worked a lot of 120-hour weeks. And when you start talking about working 120-hour weeks, you're like, wait, how many hours are in the week?
Right.
But 120 hours is a lot, and the weather's always the same in the operating room. Okay, it doesn't vary in there no matter what it looks like outside. So it's
always cold anyway.
That's right. So but yeah, I think that if you ask me about, I think Seattle's still gray for 9 months a year is tough. I love Boston. I love the weather in Boston. I love the fact that the trees change colors and that the snow happens. And Oxford, Oxford has the same. They seem to have. It seems to be wetter in Oxford. So it's interesting because for like 4 or 5 or 6 weeks of the year, the buildings in Oxford dry out and they become this beautiful sort of manila yellow color. But the rest of the time, they're this kind of gray color to match the sky because it's so wet in Oxford and it's so gray in Oxford most of the time. But Oxford's an awesome place. It's just that you need to be inside that pub drinking that half-price beer and talking to people from all over the world.
That's a pretty good answer. We'll take that one. And the last one, I know you're not a golfer, but you know both of these people. The greatest golfer of all time, your opinion, Nicklaus or Tiger? And you don't have to be a golfer to.
I know.
To get that
I have to say Tiger. But I want to say that I'm influenced a little bit by the fact that just like Jackie Robinson did some things in baseball, Tiger made some inroads in golf.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm seeing that as somebody who's not a golfer. Okay, so I think that Tiger should get some credit for that. But man, it's hard to vote against Nicklaus. Man, come on. I mean, for me, who wasn't around to really appreciate his game, personally and by watching him, I can just remember him as a little boy, just a little bit. But I mean, he's a titan. He's a god off the Mount of Olympus,
right.
And Tiger's a real guy, I mean, but man, it's just hard to say. So I think in their ways, man, they're both just awesome. So
that's a great answer. You have anything coming up? You writing a book? You're going to be speaking anywhere you can direct people to? Or
nope. I'm going to try to learn how to do astrophotography, man, which is super expensive and so incredibly detailed that it makes surgery look easy.
Wow.
So yeah, but like everything in today, and this is one thing that has to do with the modern world that I'm super thankful for, you can learn to do almost anything off the internet.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I have learned particle physics and astronomy off the internet. So, I mean, because really we've come so far in particle physics and astronomy since the time when I was in college and they were teaching me these things, 25 years ago, 30 years ago, that I would have to learn it from somewhere. And if you just go on to YouTube, you can learn how to do anything. And I'm trying to learn how to do astrophotography.
You never one short to challenge yourself.
Well, I don't want to make it out to be too complicated, but it has so far frustrated me on numerous occasions, which I take to mean that it's good.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, it's challenging
me,
right?
Yeah.
You're growing. If you stop growing, like we said earlier, you stop growing, you stop moving. That's it. You might as well start going the other direction. Hey, Doc, it's been great. Everybody, you had a great reputation when you came here, and you exceeded it, which is hard to believe, but you've done it. And everyone in the whole area, the area is happy to have you. Very lucky to have you, and it's been a pleasure.
This is an awesome place to live, and I think one of the reasons I think it's hard to say that golf is not the reason it's such an awesome place to live, and I think that golf is something that is truly a gift that we've been given on so many fronts. Not the least of which is it's a beautiful way to spend an afternoon out in nature, mm-hmm. where it's quiet, unless somebody like Bobby Knight or the basketball player from Auburn,
Charles Barkley.
Charles Barkley are playing. Because I will have to say that I have gotten, since I don't golf, I do watch golf videos, and I love watching those two play on the internet. If you want to laugh, I'm giving a plug for those two on the internet. So,
well, in the summary, if someone got some back issues and they need to get a hold of you, wherever they're from, they're welcome to come to Hilton Head and visit you.
Eager to see.
They'll be able to reach. I'll put the office contact info and Brandy's number, and they can come get fixed up by you.
Awesome.
Thanks, Doc.
That's what I do. I appreciate it.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for listening to today's show. If you enjoyed it, you can find more information on today's episode and other topics at golf360.blog. There you'll find the show notes and links related to this episode, as well as any other episode that we've done so far to date. If you're interested in improving your game and would like to learn more from yours truly by taking a private lesson, a half-day or multi-day school, club or putter fitting, you can reach me through the blog site or by email, pete@golf360.blog. So some of you may be asking, what is the golf paradigm? All you have to do is click on the homepage while on my blog site to discover how you can start playing better than you ever thought possible. Or you can simply sign up, again, on the blog page for my instructional videos where I give regular tips on all areas of the game to include the swing, club design and fitting, health, fitness and nutrition, the mental aspects, and equally as important, the integration of all those things together. I'm also on social media, and you can find me at The Golf Paradigm. That's Paradigm, and I'm on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel, also under the same name, The Golf Paradigm. Facebook is usually the best way to reach me for questions and or comments, and I look forward to hearing what all of you have to say. This podcast is brought to you in part by Old South Golf Links. A short ride across a bridge from Hilton Head Island is one of the area's finest golf courses and a hidden treasure. Set up on towering pines and ancient oaks with sweeping marsh vistas, truly makes Old South Golf Links a one-of-a-kind golfing experience. The Clyde Johnson design was named one of the top 10 new public courses when it opened, and it also takes full advantage of the natural beauty of the Lowcountry. Old South is a fun and unique challenge for golfers of every skill level and a favorite of both locals and visitors. Whether it's your first time here or you're a regular, you'll be treated and feel like family. From the bag drop to check-in at the fully stocked pro shop with both men's and women's apparel, to breakfast or lunch before or after your round, the staff is always ready and willing to help. Experience for yourself why Old South is one of the premier golf courses in the Hilton Head area and why it will quickly become a favorite of yours too. Visit them in person or online at www.oldsouthgolf.com, or to make it tee time, simply call the pro shop at 843-785-5353.